Janna is a fantastic intermediate support for anyone who's wanting to make that transition from the more defensive yet more safe support choices such as Taric and Soraka to those more offensively minded yet more risky support choices such as Blitzcrank, Nautilus and Leona. As a support, she actually specializes in breaking up enemy formations while giving the enemy team a good amount of CC to deal with, and at the same time giving her own team a good amount of buffs and heals. For this reason, she's actually one of the best scaling supports in the game, which has meant that her aptitude as a support has earned her actually quite a lot of bans in MLG games. Janna's passive is Tailwind. Janna and her allies will benefit from 3% movement speed increase. This is fantastic for general mobility, but also for chasing down fleeing enemies, and of course getting out of sticky situations yourself. It's important to note, however, that the buff is lost when Janna is dead. Janna's Q is Howling Gale. Janna will initially aim the skill shot and allow it to charge. On release, a mighty whirlwind will be cast, moving through all enemies along the skill shot and knocking them into the air, while dealing magic damage. It's important to note that the longer you allow the spell to charge, the more magic damage it will do, the higher its range, and also the knockup duration will as well increase. Due to the decreasing cooldowns on this spell, I take this at level 1 and max it by level 13. Janna's W is Zephyr. As a passive, Janna has an air elemental next to her that will grant her increased movement speed and allow her to ignore unit collision. Janna can turn a spell into an active by launching her air elemental to someone else. The elemental will deal damage to that person and slow them for 4 seconds. It's important to note that while the spell is in cooldown, the passive will not be active. This is great for chasing down a single target, as while your movement speed will be decreased, everyone else will still have their same movement speed and will be able to chase down that single target very easily. However, its use in teamfights isn't that great. Again, its cooldown does decrease, and as a result I take this at level 3, however I only max it last. Janna's E is Eye of the Storm. Janna will conjure a shield around the target allied champion or turret that will shield them from damage for up to 5 seconds. While the shield is active, the target will also gain attack damage bonus. This attack damage is lost when the shield is broken, even if the full 5 seconds aren't up. Due to the attack damage bonus being flat, and also the shield itself being a great way of keeping your allied AD carry alive, I take this at level 2, however I max it first, by level 9. Janna's ultimate is Monsoon. Janna will knock back surrounding enemies, and then will channel Healing Winds, and these will restore health to nearby allies every half second, for 4 seconds. To be honest, the healing on this power isn't exactly what draws people to taking Janna. It is in fact the knockback, which can be an amazing piece of CC at just completely destroying enemy formations, and is one of the reasons why a Janna flash ult can win you team fights. As a result of this, I obviously, as with all other ultimates in the game, take this at level 6, 11 and 16. One of Janna's main fortes in the early game is her ability to coordinate ganks with use of her CC. Here Vayne is on her own in bot lane, and Hecarim has moved down to the enemy golem cam. He decides to move in for the gank, as you can see on the minimap, just as Vayne moves forward, much to her detriment. As Hecarim comes in, Vayne rolls into the brush, then smacks Hecarim back, followed by a flash. I then use my Howling Gale, and followed by a Zephyr, and then once Zephyr has run out, I then use an Exhaust. Hecarim uses his ult, and despite Vayne casting her ult also, Hecarim manages to pick up the kill and get away with only 100 health. Here I use a shield on Hecarim, and seeing a Munu coming, I use a Howling Gale to block his bandage toss as well, and manage to get away while picking up the kill for no deaths. Later on in the game, I eliminate Lee Sim in the bottom brush of my CV. At this point, Ezreal, Nasus and Hecarim decide to gang up on him. He flashes, and with a bit of help from enemy creep wave manages to get away. So annoyingly, not even Ezreal's ultimate can kill him. At this point, however, we're completely out of position and Nasus gets separated from the rest of the team. See here, Unicast's ultimate, which I think just about catches Nasus, but misses Hecarim barely, keeping him alive. Nasus casts his ultimate to keep him alive. I decide not to shield him at this point, as I feel that he can get away quite easily. However, Malzahar makes a gutsy move moving through the tri-brush, manages to kill Vayne, however he gets ignited just before I put on my shield, and sadly gets killed. However, he does take Lee Sin with him, as well as Vayne. Nasus manages to juke away from Amunu and Nunu, and now I miss a Howling Gale. However, we're going to chase Amunu through the bottom river here. Nasus dukes Munu again, however Munu manages to land his bandage toss, and I shield Nasus to keep him out of harm's way just for now. We CC Munu to death, however annoyingly Anivia and Nunu turn up and manage to kill Nasus together. At this point it's looking quite bad, but Hecarim turns up, and if you watch here, as Hecarim kills Nunu, I managed to catch both Amunu and Anivia with Howling Gale. I Zephyr Anivia and then exhaust her, and together we pick up the kill. Anivia turns into her egg form, and as a result we win the team fight for only 2 losses and taking 4 of them with us. When looking at runes, I tend to go for this setup, taking 9 flat magic penetration marks, 6 flat armor seals, 3 mana regen per level seals, and 9 magic resist per level glyphs. I also take 3 gold per 10-second quintessences. The marks and seals will basically be my early game tools and will allow me to do a lot of damage with my Q and W, and also the armor is basically just there so that I can get that bit tankiness and won't get killed too quickly by the AD carry. The mana regen per level is simply just to prevent me from ever having a late game shortage of mana. And the magic resist per level glyphs, which is something I recommend for every single support in the game, is simply because obviously I'm not going to be taking on too much AP in the early stages of the game. However, late game I will need to adjust, and that tankiness is always welcome. Gold per 10 second is just something you need as a support, because obviously you're going to be short of gold and you need all that gold for things like oracles and wars, which are really actually very expensive when you tally it up at the end. When looking at masteries for Janna, I generally go for a 8-1-21 setup, grabbing the increased summoner heal and defense, and the increased CDR and AP in offense. For utility, I take increased ward vision, increased gold per 10 second, however not the increased starting gold because it is useless. I'd also take the summoner cooldown, the mana regen, the mana per level, and just anything that will give me increased CDR. This means I have actually starting CDR of 10%, which is actually incredibly useful, and you will really notice a change when you have those 10% CDR. Overall, with the items, masteries and runes, as with all supports, I will be able to get a lot of gold, and as a result we'll be able to get more wards and just generally have a quicker route to my item build. I also take increased experience, by the way, in utility, simply because I will be underleveled as a result of not farming, and as a result of that I need to get all the XP I can. Overall, this build will give me the 3 things that I desperately need as a support: CDR, mana regen, and of course increased gold and XP. When looking at summoner spells for Janna, I obviously take CV, as this is just a basic thing that is required by all supports. I will rage if I hear anybody saying that they use this new meta ideas. Yes, I am doing the bunny ears of not taking CV. It is just something that you need. You may think, oh, this is useless. It is not. When you get to high elo and you discover people counter warding, you will love CV, and eventually you will actually learn how to use it. If you think that it is useless, that means you aren't using it right. I'll just be quite frankly blunt with that. So do not give up on CV, people. I will rage at you if I am in your game and see you not taking CV as a support, because it makes you a fool. I'm sorry. However, moving on, if you're looking for the other thing to take, I would recommend either exhaust or heal. I generally take exhaust with Janna, as now I've sort of moved away from taking heal, as people, the AD carry will seem to take heal, and always, for some reason, because I'm about 900 elo, one other person always seems to decide that they must have a heal. As a result, I generally say exhaust is the best thing. It helps you coordinate ganks and means that in 2v2s you're very much likely to win, barring of course the enemy team having a exhaust themselves. You can take flash. Technically it will allow you to actually flash ult, which can really just screw up an enemy formation in team fights. I have seen it used very effectively. I haven't mastered it myself, so that's why I'm not recommending it to you right now, because I would not recommend something to you that I would not recommend to myself. Again, this will just give Janna a good amount of security of the heal or exhaust. If you take exhaust, you have a bit of escape, and the heal is just there so that you can have an increased laning presence and not have to go back to base so often. When looking at items for Janna, I generally open up with a Fairy Charm, 2 health pots and 3 normal wards, as this is just a normal setup for any support who isn't that mana hungry, which Janna is not. I then go for KG's Lucky Pick, Heart of Gold and Philosopher's Stone, as these are all 3 gold per 10 items. I then go for Aegis of Legion and Merc Treads, as this will give me and my team some good tankiness as well as a bit more attack. And then go for Shirelli's Reverie, simply because the active on this is a fantastic chase and escape tool, followed by Randut's Omen, because again, the active is just fantastic, and it means that if any team is stupid enough to focus me, they're going to suffer for it. I then take Deathfire Grasp, simply because it's a lead on from KG's Lucky Pick, and it will also give my heals and shields and such a bit extra oomph. Finally, if you're looking for an extra item, if you wanted to charge down the enemy's Nexus, I would recommend either Rabadon's Death Cap or Rylai's Crystal Scepter. However, again, normally I would recommend that you do not take a 6th item and simply take either elixirs or just take what I would always say, which would be just more wards, and of course the ever important Oracle's Auxiliary. The reason I take Rylai's is because the Slow and Zephyr becomes absolutely horrific and will basically give you a free kill for any straggler at the end of a team fight. Rabadon's Death Cap will just synergize your Deathfire Grasp and allow your spells to give your team more shields, give your teams more heals while doing more damage to the enemy. This build is basically the normal setup and is actually exactly the same, I think, as my Soraka setup, just because they're quite similar type characters. This is probably a setup you're going to see me use for most AP based supports in the game, as I feel it gives you a good amount of tankiness, security, as well as giving you a good amount of damage, and of course some amount of gold for all those important wards, oracles, and such. You have been watching the Janna Support Champion Spotlight, produced by the FFGamers Group. I have been SSJ, your host for today, and I hope you use my build in future games. I hope you tell me what you think about my build, and I hope that you also comment, rate, and subscribe. Feel free to look at the rest of our network by clicking the links in the picture here, and also feel free to tell me about your builds and how you play Janna, because you know what, if I have the time, I will reply and tell you what I think, and you know what, I'll probably test them out as well. So, till next time, goodbye.